Welcome to Horror Year, where every story is a journey into the unknown. If you're brave enough to face your darkest fears and uncover the most chilling tales, you've come to the right place. So, dim the lights, turn up the volume, and subscribe to Horror Year. Your journey into terror begins now. Abby, my 9-year-old daughter, has long had an odd phobia of mythological animals. I hold my former partner, her mother, accountable for allowing her unfettered internet access from an early age. I had to get a nightlight to help her sleep because I was getting tired of having to check beneath her bed and in her closet for monsters every time she spent the weekend at my house. I understood when she was younger. Many children have a fear of the dark and of objects that move silently at night. But as time passed, I grew irritated with this. She was so sick of it that she could not sleep in the dark, refused to go outside at night, and didn't want to sleep alone anymore. Abby and I got into a fight 2 weekends ago when she refused to take out the garbage after supper since it was becoming dark. She simply needed to walk 5 feet out the door, but she dug her heels in, which made me angry. That week, I made up my mind to take her camping in the wilderness for the weekend so she could face her anxieties and get away from all the internet crap. I grabbed Abby a warm sweater, hiking pants, walking shoes, and some inexpensive t-shirts to take for our weekend trip. She pretty much has her whole closet here. But I didn't want her to be upset if anything happened to them. In order to be ready for our trip, I left work a little early on Friday and packed a suitcase for my daughter and me. After packing the car, I headed to my ex's place to pick up Abby. When Abby met me at the door, I held out a carrying bag stuffed with trekking gear. With a smile, I give her the bag and say, "Hey you, go put these on." "What is it?" Peering into the bag, she asks. I tell her, "Walking gear. This is going to be an adventure." My former partner Martha and her new companion Steve sauntered to the door as Abby hurried upstairs to change. Martha gave me a half-hearted smile and nodded hello, saying, "Hello, Paul. I hope you're well." After exchanging pleasantries for a bit, Martha inquired about our weekend plans. I say to her softly, "Camping," under the pretense of a vigorous hike. Martha shakes her head and scowls, saying, "Oh, Paul, no. You are aware of her behavior when it's dark." Steve nodded to me and said, "Leave him be, Marth. It will definitely benefit the girl." My dad would have followed suit. With a pursed mouth, Martha seemed to consider a counter-argument, but then she gave up in despair. "All right, I suppose. Paul, just take care of her," she severely instructed me. Before I could reply, Steve gave her a shoulder rub and reassured her that everything would be fine. "Don't you fret." After a short while, Abby went back to the door. "How does it fit?" I questioned her. She lifted her foot in front of her and said, "Well, the shoes fit fine, but the trousers are a touch long and the fleece is sorta huge." She wasn't incorrect, but I attributed it to the uncertainty of internet buying. "It seems fine to me," Steve stated, nodding to me one last time as my daughter and I headed back to the car. "This hike is taking so damn long, Dad." With her arms dangling by her sides, Abby whimpered. "You usually have a lot of energy. It's only been a few hours," I chuckle. We continued going till we came to a wide open space. "This will suffice," I declared, removing my backpack from my shoulders. Abby gave me a puzzled look. "For what purpose?" "The campground," I grinned. Abby's gaze expanded. "What?" She lost her temper. "Assure me you're kidding." "Oh, please don't be so dramatic," I said. "Did you miss the hint when I took this enormous bag out of the car?" Abby started to panic and told me we had to head out because it was going to get dark soon. "Now, please calm down," I reassured her. "There's no way we'll return to the car before dark. Together, let's make camp and build a large fire." I purchased marshmallows. We had set up the tent, consumed hot dogs and baked beans, and gathered around the campfire to enjoy marshmallows atop sticks. "Observe," I grinned at her. "This isn't all that horrible. Being away from screens and pollutants, isn't it refreshing? I suppose. "Do you want a Coke?" Taking 2 cans of fizzy drink out of my backpack, I asked. Abby's eyebrow shot up. "After 7? Mom and you never allowed me to drink Coke after 7. I gave a nod. "Yes, I suppose you're correct. I assumed you might want one as a treat, but as you mentioned, no." While I was pretending to put the sodas away, Abby gave me a playful yell. I handed her a can, and we both resumed our places at opposite ends of the fire, our sodas giving out a hiss as we removed the tabs. "Thus, why do you feel afraid of the dark?" After taking my pack of smokes out of my pocket and smoking one, I asked her. Abby traced the rim of the can with her finger. "You understand why?" I answer. "Monsters." Abby nodded without opening her eyes. "Do you think that monsters exist?" she inquired. I gave a headshake. "Well, I don't think that the monsters you create with your claws and horns are real. However, I think certain evil people can truly be monsters." Abby said to me, "I don't believe in those kinds of things." I arched an eyebrow. "Well, so what kinds of beliefs do you hold?" Abby poked a finger at the tab and glanced back down at her can. "Are you familiar with the hermits?" "The what?" A small laugh leaked out of my mouth as I inquired. Again, my daughter said, "The hermits." I can't say that I have. After taking her phone out of her bag, Abby showed me a folder in her photo gallery that she had opened. I set my can down beside me and start to flip through. The first picture was a sketch of a humanoid monster with somewhat pointed ears and pale white eyes with snake-like pupils. Its hair was thin, colorless, and oily. It was depicted with only a white shred of cloth around its groin, giving the impression that its nose had been removed. The second was an image that resembled the drawing and looked lifelike. It was smiling, pointed yellow teeth showing through long, sharp fingernails. It had grayish skin and a hairless body. It was slender and appeared to hunch over. Instead of wearing the torn white fabric as seen in the photograph, it had a small, protruding pouch that resembled a kangaroo, which is where a human's reproductive organs would be. I swiped down to see the following picture, which included 2 separate sketches of the creature, along with primarily text. With a somewhat wider chest, a pouch that hung sideways, and a more flexible, hunched-over posture, one appeared more masculine and the other more feminine. I swiped my finger across the screen to reveal the following image, which included various places and photos of victims along with local statistics of missing children and hikers who disappeared without a trace. This picture was followed by a screenshot of a text document. Where they can easily obtain food, the hermits typically live in farms and woodlands. The bone marrow of larger mammals such as horses, deer, cattle, and humans is typically the hermit's dietary supply. The smell of blood attracts the hermits. Some claim to be able to detect it up to a mile away. However, this hasn't been confirmed. Hermits are gregarious predators that adhere to the same pack hierarchy as wolves. The hermits defy gender norms in the pack, with males and females participating in comparable activities and holding comparable rankings. I kept flipping through the album, revealing more drawings, photos, and shaky footage from the camera. "Well, they do seem a little unsettling," I said. "However, they aren't real. Since I was a child, several types of folklore have been prevalent. It used to frighten me a little bit too, but now it's just convincing me." I returned Abby's phone and she scowled at me. "Dad, it's not phony. I've had a look at them. They wander through the forest behind the home." I laughed. "That's correct?" A sharp branch from the log I was sitting on hooked my fleece's sleeves as I shifted my arm, removing some of the thread. I snarled and raised my arm to examine the wound, saying, "Damn it." Abby leaped up abruptly. "Did you cut your own skin?" She gave a little squeak. No, I told her. "I just got my fleece hooked on a stick." Abby went on a rant about how she needed to make sure my arm wasn't bleeding by looking for cuts. They can detect blood odor. They aim for the injured in order to kill them quickly. I sighed as I turned to face her. "Kid, just help us get ready for bed." I tried to settle in by turning over in my sleeping bag. All that illuminated our shelter was the faint yellow beam from the flashlight that Abby had us hang from the tent ceiling. Just as I was ready to nod off, something pricked my shoulder. "I need a wee, Dad." I pivoted and ascended into my cozy sleeping bag. "All right, please accept the light. Don't push yourself too much." "Will you accompany me?" Abby questioned clumsily. I answered her, "You're plenty old enough to do these things by yourself," knowing that my doom was certain. I had already unzipped my sleeping bag. Reaching for the flashlight, I climbed out of the tent and pointed it toward a big tree. "Take this light. Now proceed behind that tree over there." I spun around and inhaled deeply, exhausted as the cool air touched my face. With a pallid face, my daughter came back. "Daddy, there's a problem." "What's the deal?" "I believe I may be bleeding." "Where and what? Have you been scraped?" "In case anything gets serious, I have a first aid kit," and Abby pointed to her lap and interrupted me. "There." She gave me a look, clearly uncomfortable and upset. It required a moment for me to understand. "Oh, that's right, no. It's normal, so don't worry. That's just something you develop as you get older." What an odd place for it to happen, he thought. As I inhaled deeply and hoped that I had handled the issue well, Abby disappeared into the tent. A few moments later, Abby emerged from the tent. She told me regretfully that she had left her weekend bag in the car. "Yeah, that will be all right." I grinned. "I'll wash everything tomorrow while you take a soothing bath." Abby gave me a grudging smile before her expression darkened. "They're going to smell it." "Huh?" "The recluses. They refuse to. Let's attempt to get some rest." A shriek startled me up. I straightened up and peered at my daughter's sleeping bag in the dark. It was bare. I fought my way out of the open tent and my sleeping bag. "Abby?" "Abby," I yelled as I looked around. I dashed over when I saw a beam of light from behind the big tree that Abby had been using earlier. "Abs, how are you doing?" Without replying, Abby's trembling fingers directed the light towards the edge of the trees. I gently removed the flashlight from her quivering hand and comforted her by massaging her shoulders. "Sweetheart, what has occurred?" "Earlier, I dropped my bracelet here." Fear gripping her voice, Abby said, "I thought I'd be brave and go get it, so I didn't want to wake you." Her bracelet twisted tensely between her fingers. "How come you screamed? Did you feel afraid of anything?" After carefully removing the bracelet from her fingers and placing it in my pocket, I asked her. "I thought she might claim to have heard an animal call or a twig snap." Abby gestured slowly in our direction. "It's concealed by that tree." I followed her direction with my light, confused, only to see a figure walk backward and out of sight. "What the heck?" With a hint of wrath mixed with fear, I stated it aloud. I demanded to know who was out there by calling out into the night before I could even think. Abby clutched my waist as we stood motionless. "Daddy." We spun around as a big branch snapped behind us before Abby could say anything. I tried shining the light everywhere, but I couldn't see anything. Everywhere we looked, there was the sound of twigs snapping and a screech from the trees. "Let's go back to the tent," I mumble. Although I now realized that the shelter was a mirage, I was aware that I had a tiny survival knife in my luggage. With the campsite partially illuminated by the flickering embers of our fire, we cautiously made our way back towards the tent. I took my daughter by the arm, and she started to walk back to the tent. A grimy gray foot gently vanished into our tent. Fear keeping her from screaming, Abby gasped. I held my breath and felt time stand still, my heart pounding in my ears. The sound of a stick crunching behind us was enough to jolt me out of my horrified daze. "Run," I growled, almost pulling my daughter by the arm as we made our way through the bracken and into the tree line. Cries erupted from behind us, but I chose not to turn around. There was a lot of rustling going on behind us. "They're in the trees, Daddy." Abigail let out a scream. "Just keep running," I said as I dragged her forward, my palm firmly gripping her arm and my eyes meeting hers. My body jerked as Abby tripped, letting go of the flashlight. In an instant, I quickly hauled her back up and we kept running without stopping to grab our one remaining light source. My stomach sank, and I hurriedly decelerated, pleading with God that this path would take us back to the car, or at the very least, out of harm's way. We were imprisoned by the sheer walls of a dark, moonlit valley. I hissed, quickly swiveling my head left and right, and then decided to go straight ahead. "Daddy," Abby sobbed as I started to drag her, gesturing to the spot where I was pulling her. I checked. In front of us, a long, gray, bony hand with pointed black fingernails slowly vanished under a tree. I halted and pushed Abby behind me in a protective stance. Branches snapped all around us as screams filled the jungle. My daughter held my hand as figures slowly emerged from behind the woods to stare at us. Their eyes glistened like animals, their long, thin white hair flowing down and glowing in the moonlight. There was a deep, rumbling snarl from behind us that made the woodland seem to stop. When I turned to face it, I saw that a low-lying, hunched creature was on all fours, stalking us. It approached, stood up on 2 feet, smelt the air, and grinned gurglingly at my daughter. Sharp, yellowed teeth crowded the mouth. I moved Abby away so that I was enclosing her in a tree and my body. "Return," I shouted, elevating my shoulders. The thing crept gently into the moonlight and peered at me, its slitted pupils widening slightly. "Daddy!" Abigail let out a scream. When I turned back, I saw that my daughter was being pulled up the tree by a long gray arm that was attached to her waist. I started violently attempting to take the arm away from my kid by punching, scratching, and bending it. Suddenly, there was a tremendous knock on my back and I started to tumble. I was flung into the ravine by the thing that struck me so forcefully in the moonlight. I rolled down the muddy borders of the ravine and into an ankle-deep stream below, my body thudding against the stony walls. I struggled to stand and stumbled on some rocks, twisting my foot and falling with a stinging pain. The screams of my daughter echoed from above. I tried to climb back up by grasping onto rocks and roots as I feverishly clawed at the ravine sides, but I was unable to do so. "Abigail!" I yelled uncontrollably, dragging my fingers against the pebbles and anxiously searching somewhere to climb. Above me, the branches creaked and the trees rustled, and I could hear my daughter's cries fading and the monster's screeches. "Daddy!" No, dear Abigail." I strolled along the gully until daybreak, at which point I discovered a place I might ascend. I gazed at the sunrise, dazed. I kept limping briskly until I reached my car, where I fell into the driver's seat after removing my car keys from my fleece pocket. With tears in my eyes, I slammed the steering wheel, inserted the key into the ignition, and sped into town. My police report is filed. At first, the police didn't think I was telling the truth, although they later acknowledged receiving numerous odd stories from the woods. I told them it's not conceivable, but they think it's a group of sick people in costumes going for hikers and campers. Abby has vanished from sight. I'm hoping that she managed to escape and will return at some point. We found our campsite completely destroyed. Following a thorough search of the woodland, police discovered the skeletal remains of a few of the hikers who had gone missing. Teeth marks were everywhere on the broken bones. Police believe they were bitten by an animal. Martha accuses me and has since asked to stay off of my life. It's not like I blame her. I was unable to protect our daughter. That guilt will be a daily part of my life. If only I could go back in time, I would choose to spend that weekend at home. This is not a story where I see faces outside my window or hear things in the middle of the night. Since then, I haven't ventured to the woods, and I always keep my house well lit. I apologize for not being able to shield you, Abby. If you're reading this and you're out there, you gave me the motivation to start my day each morning, to get through the work week, and to smile. Without you, life isn't as bright. I still have your bracelet. It's the first thing I see when I wake up and the final thing I see before I go to sleep. I keep it on my nightstand. Please return later. Abs, I share your fear of cryptids. And that brings us to the end of today's delightful story. I really hope it had you on the edge of your seat. If you liked this story, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button. It means a lot to me. And if you're new around here, feel free to subscribe. There's always an exciting surprise waiting just around the corner, and you won't want to miss it. Do you have a spooky story to share or a fun idea for our next tale? Feel free to share in the comments below. I'm really curious to know what gives you the creeps the most. And as always, take care, keep exploring. And remember, sometimes the most chilling tales are the ones left untold. Catch you in the next one, if you're up for it.